The alarm screamed through every corridor of defense. Station Omega-7 and Commander Velther watched his tactical display with growing horror. Red icons swarmed across the holographic screen like a plague of locusts, and each icon represented a Kresh warship. The insectoid invaders had already destroyed 3 civilized star systems in just 2 weeks, and now they had come for Omega-7 shield strength at 40%. His tactical officer reported. The young officer's voice trembled despite his training. Velther's forearms gripped the command railing as another explosion rocked the station. Through the massive viewport, he could see the battle raging in the darkness. Of space Kresh bioships moved in perfect coordination, and their organic hulls pulsed with sickly green light. These weren't machines but living creatures bred for war and destruction. Each ship could regenerate damage within minutes, and they moved with the unity of a hive mind. How long until reinforcements arrive? Velther asked. His communications officer hesitated before answering. 6 days. Commander, 6 days. The station's shields would fail in 18 hours, and 40,000 civilians sheltered in the lower decks, refugees from 12 different species, had fled to Omega-7 seeking protection from the Kresh advance. Velther had promised them safety, and now he would fail them. Commander, a young voice called from the intelligence station. Cass was an Andorian barely out of the academy with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. I have a suggestion. Velther turned toward her, and his expression showed little hope. Speak. There's a newly discovered species in Sector 7. Cass said quickly. They achieved faster than light travel 5 years ago, and their planet was catalogued recently. A primitive species? Velther's second officer scoffed. What help could they provide? Cass pulled up data on her screen, and her fingers moved rapidly across the controls. Their planet is classified as a death world. Sir, the bridge fell silent. Death worlds were rare in the galaxy, and most species that evolved on such planets never achieved spaceflight. The challenges of surviving on a hostile world typically prevented technological development. What classification level? Velther asked. Class 9. Commander. Several officers gasped, and even Velther's eyes widened. Class 9 meant the planet was barely habitable by galactic standards. The species calls themselves humans. Cass continued. Their planet Earth has gravity 1.4 times galactic standard, and the atmosphere contains 21% oxygen, which is toxic to most species at those concentrations. What else? Velther asked, and his interest was growing despite the desperate situation. The planet experiences regular natural disasters, including hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis. Cass read from her display. The human entry file lists Earth as hazardous in 12 different environmental categories, and predators on Earth include creatures that hunt humans specifically. And they survived this? The tactical officer asked in disbelief. Not just survived. Cass replied. They thrived and became the dominant species and achieved spaceflight despite all these obstacles. Velther considered this information carefully. The Galactic Council had largely ignored Earth because human technology was generations behind Council standards, but perhaps technology wasn't everything. Send them a distress call. Velther ordered. All channels in Priority Alpha. His second officer protested immediately. Commander, this violates protocol, and we should wait for Council approval before contacting primitive species. In 18 hours, there won't be anyone left to approve anything. Velther said firmly. Send the message. Halfway across the galaxy, Captain Connor Blake stood in the observation deck of Earth's primary orbital defense platform. The planet below was a beautiful blue and green sphere wrapped in white clouds. Connor was a tall man with short dark hair and steady gray eyes that had seen more combat than most people his age. At 42, he had spent his entire adult life in Earth's defense forces. Captain. Incoming transmission. Lieutenant Katie Morrison called from the communications station. Katie was young but brilliant, with red hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. "It's a distress call and priority Alpha," Connor moved to the nearest terminal and pulled up the message. Automated translation showed a desperate plea from Commander Velthor of the Centauri Alliance A station, full of civilians, was under attack by an enemy called the Kresh. Reinforcements were too far away, and the station would fall within hours. "Where's the location?" Connor asked. Katie worked a console and brought up star charts. "Sector 7 Alpha, and it's 16 hours away at maximum hyperspace speed." Connor studied the data carefully. The Kresh were unknown to Earth, and humanity had only begun exploring beyond their own solar system 5 years ago. Most species in the galaxy treated humans like children or curiosities. This could be a trap, or it could be exactly what it appeared to be. 40,000 people about to die. "Katie, get me the Ed's Frontier," Connor ordered. "Prep the crew for immediate departure." "Captain, we should wait for authorization from Earth Command," Katie said carefully. She wasn't questioning his judgment, but following proper protocol. Connor looked at the distress call again, and the timestamp showed it was already 3 hours old. Every minute they waited meant more people died. By the time Earth Command analyzes this, debates it, and issues orders, everyone on that station will be dead. Connor said quietly, "I'm not willing to let that happen because of bureaucracy." Katie smiled slightly and began issuing orders. Within the hour, the EDS Frontier broke orbit and moved away from Earth. The ship was experimental, with human-designed engines that could withstand accelerations that would kill most galactic species. Connor stood on the bridge and watched Earth shrink behind them. His crew numbered 200, including Marines, engineers, medical staff, and pilot. Sergeant Eric Hayes commanded the Marine detachment with his stocky build and scarred face that told stories of combat on Earth. Dr. Lauren Chem led the medical team with her calm competence and steady hands that had saved countless lives. "All stations report ready," Katie announced from her tactical station. "Course laid in and hyperspace generators at full power." Connor took his seat in the captain's chair, and his hands gripped the armrests. "Take us to hyperspace," he ordered. "Maximum speed." The Frontier's engines blazed with blue-white light, and reality twisted around the ship as it entered the faster-than-light corridor. Stars stretched into lines and then disappeared entirely as the ship exceeded the speed of light. "Time to destination?" Connor asked. 16 hours. "Captain," the navigation officer reported. Connor activated the ship-wide communication system. "This is the captain," he said, and his voice carried to every deck. "We're responding to a distress call from an alien species under attack, and 40,000 civilians are about to die unless someone helps them." He paused and gathered his thoughts. "We're that someone, and I know we're new to this galaxy, and most species out here think we're primitive. Maybe we are by their standards, but Earth-taught. You ask something they might not understand. When someone calls for help, you answer, and you don't ask if it's convenient or safe. You just go because it's the right thing to do. We've got 16 hours to prepare, and I want everyone ready for combat. We don't know what we're flying into, but we're going anyway. That's what humans do." Connor closed the channel and looked at Katie. "Run continuous tactical drills, and I want the Marines in full combat readiness and have medical prepare for mass casualties." "Yes, sir," Katie replied and began issuing orders. The Frontier raced through hyperspace toward a battle that had already claimed 3 civilizations. Connor knew they might be flying to their deaths, but 40,000 innocent people needed help. That was enough. That had to be enough. The Frontier dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Omega-7 system, and immediately every sensor screamed warnings. "Jesus," Katie whispered from her tactical station. Connor stared at the main view screen and counted thousands of Kresh ships swarming around the defense station. The Alien vessels moved like insects crawling over a carcass, and their organic hulls pulsed with that sickly green bioluminescence. Give me a tactical analysis. Connor ordered Kay's. Fingers flew across her console, and her face grew more grim with each passing second. Station shields are at 11% and failing, she reported. I'm reading at least 4,000 crash vessels of varying sizes, and the defenders have maybe 200 ships left. What about the station's weapons? Connor asked, offline. Katie said, looks like they took a direct hit to the primary power grid. Connor studied the tactical display, and his years of combat experience analyzed the situation automatically. Defenders were losing badly, and the crash used swarm tactics. That overwhelmed traditional defensive formations. Every time an Allied ship destroyed one crash vessel, 3 more took its place. Open a channel to the station. Connor ordered all frequencies. A moment later, a holographic image appeared before Connor, and Commander Velther materialized looking exhausted and desperate. The Centauri commander had 4 arms and gray skin marked with ceremonial tattoos. Large eyes widened when he saw Connor. You're human, Velther said in surprise. Yes. We received your distress call. Connor replied. We came as fast as we could. Velther's expression shifted to something between gratitude and concern. Captain, I appreciate your response, but you should withdraw, the commander said carefully. The crash are overwhelming us, and even our most advanced warships can't stop them. Your technology is, he paused, searching for diplomatic words, still developing. Connor understood what Velther really meant, and humans were primitive by galactic standards. How many civilians are on that station? Connor asked. 40,000, Velther answered. Refugees. From multiple species. Connor nodded slowly, and his decision was already made. Then we're not leaving. Commander, Velther started to protest, but Connor cut him off. We didn't come all this way to watch, and Katie, what's our best approach vector? Katie highlighted a path on the tactical display that cut directly through the crash formation. It's aggressive. Captain, she warned, we'll take heavy fire. Aggressive is what we do best. Connor said, take us in and maximum acceleration. Aye, Captain. The Frontier's engines roared to life, and the ship surged forward at a speed that made the Centauri defenders gasp in shock. Connor felt the G-forces press him back into his chair, but his body handled it. Easily humans had evolved under Earth's crushing gravity, and acceleration that would kill most galactic species barely affected them. Charging. Weapons, Katie announced. Railguns ready. The Frontier plunged into the crash. Swarm like a spear, and human railguns opened fire with devastating effect. Solid metal slugs accelerated to hypersonic speeds, punched through crash bioships that were designed to absorb energy weapons. The aliens had never encountered kinetic weapons before, and their adaptive armor was useless against simple physics. Target the larger vessels. Connor ordered, concentrate fire. Katie coordinated the weapons with brutal efficiency, and each railgun shot was precisely calculated. A crash cruiser exploded in a shower of green ichor, and 2 more broke apart under the sustained barrage on the fives. Station Velther watched in amazement as the human ship carved through his enemies. What kind of weapons are those? His tactical officer asked. Primitive kinetic accelerators. Kess answered from her station. They're using mass and velocity instead of energy beams. Primitive? Velther repeated. It's destroying them. The crash swarm reacted quickly, and dozens of ships converged on the Frontier bioweapons fired streams of acid and flesh-eating organisms at the human vessel, shields holding. Katie reported as the station rocked from impacts. Hull armor is taking damage, but it's holding. Connor activated the internal communication system. Eric, launch combat drones, and I want erratic flight patterns. On it, Captain. Sergeant Eric. Hayes responded. The Marine commander sat in the drone control center. Surrounded by holographic displays, his scarred hands moved across the controls with practiced ease. 30 combat drones launched from the Frontier's hangar base, and each drone was controlled by human operators who had trained in Earth's chaotic atmosphere. The drones moved in patterns that seemed random and insane to the Crash hive mind. They zigged when logic said they should zag, and dove when tactical sense demanded. They climbed. The Crash couldn't predict them because they weren't following optimal strategies. They were following human instinct. The drones are working, Katie said with satisfaction. Crash formation is breaking up around us. But the victory was temporary, and the Frontier shuddered as a massive Crash battleship fired its main weapon. Connor gripped his chair as the ship lurched violently. Shield generators 2 and 4 are offline. Katie reported hull breach on Deck 7. Seal it. Connor ordered, reroute power from non-essential systems to shields. Dr. Lauren Chun's voice came through the communication system. Captain, I'm reading casualties and Deck 7 had 12 crew members. Connor's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. Do what you can. Doctor. Lauren was already moving through the medical bay with her team. The hull breach had killed instantly, but 34 crew members had various injuries from the impact. She treated a young engineer with a broken arm while simultaneously coordinating with the medical. AJ, get me a status on all wounded. She ordered her staff, priority cases first. The Frontier continued its assault and bought precious minutes for the station. Connor's ship had drawn the attention of hundreds of Crash vessels, and the pressure on the defenders eased slightly. Storm watched from his command center and tried to understand what he was seeing. The humans were taking damage that would have forced any council ship to retreat, but they kept fighting. Their tactics were aggressive to the point of recklessness, but undeniably effective. Open a channel to the human captain. Velthor ordered. Connor's image appeared again, and this time he had a cut above his right eye from where debris had struck him. Captain Blake, you've bought us 3 hours, Velthor said. But your ship is badly damaged, and why are you doing this? We're strangers to you, and your people have no obligation to help us. Connor wiped blood from his forehead and looked directly at the Centauri commander. You sent a distress call, he said simply. You asked for help, and that's all the obligation we need. But your casualties, Velthor began, are acceptable if it means those 40,000 civilians survive. Connor interrupted. Commander, Earth isn't a safe world, and we learned a long time ago that survival means protecting each other, even at personal cost. Velthor felt something shift in his understanding of these humans. They weren't fighting for territory or resources or political advantage. They were fighting because someone asked for help. It was such a simple motivation that it seemed almost alien to the complex politics of the Galactic Council. What do you need from us? Velthor asked. Connor smiled grimly. Just hold your position and we're going to try something crazy. Crazy seems to be your specialty. Velthor observed. It's what we're good at. Connor agreed. He closed the channel and turned to Katie. Status on the Crash formation? They're adapting to our tactics, Katie reported, compensating for the railguns and adjusting their swarm patterns. To counter the drones, Connor had expected this, and the Crash were a hive mind after all. They learned quickly. Then we changed tactics. He said, Eric, prepare your Marines for boarding action. There was a pause before Eric responded. Boarding action on what, Captain? The station, Connor said. We're going to evacuate as many civilians as we can while using the Frontier as a shield. Katie looked up from her console with concern. Captain, if we dock with the station, we'll be a stationary target. I know, Connor said quietly, but those people need a way off that station, and we're it. He activated the ship-wide communication again. All hands, prepare for docking procedures in Marines. Suit up for possible combat in compromised environments. Medical Prepare to receive civilian casualties of multiple species. Engineering. I need every bit of power you can give me for shields. Connor looked at the tactical display and watched. The crash swarm reorganized. The Frontier had damaged hundreds of enemy ships, but thousands remained. His vessel was crippled, and his crew was wounded, but 40,000 people were still alive. That meant the mission wasn't over. Take us in. Connor ordered the helm. The Frontier turned toward the station and began its approach behind. Then the crash swarm surged forward, sensing victory. Connor had bought 3 hours, but time was running out. The Frontier shuddered as it connected with the fence station, Omega-7's docking port, and Connor felt the magnetic clamps engage with a heavy thud. Seal is good, the helm officer reported. Atmosphere is equalizing. Connor stood from his command chair and moved toward the airlock. Katie, you have the bridge, he said. Keep the shields focused on protecting the docking port. Understood, Captain. Connor made his way through the damaged corridors of his ship and past crew members working frantically to repair systems. Some looked up as he passed, and their faces showed exhaustion but determination. He reached the main airlock where Sergeant Eric Hayes waited with 30 Marines. All of them war-powered combat armor designed for the harshest environments Earth could produce. Eric's scarred face was visible through his helmet's transparent visor. Ready. Captain, Eric said. What's the situation on the station? Sections 12 through 18 are breached and exposed to vacuum, Connor replied. The Centauri defenders had to abandon those areas. Eric grinned beneath his helmet. Vacuum is just another Tuesday for us. The other Marines chuckled, and Connor knew what Eric meant. Human combat armor was built to handle the pressure differentials of Earth's deepest ocean trenches and the extreme temperatures of Arctic warfare. Vacuum was dangerous, but manageable. The airlock cycled open, and Connor stepped onto the station. Commander Velther waited on the other side with a security detachment. The Centauri commander looked even more exhausted than before, and his forearms hung limply at his sides. Captain Blake, Velther said formally, welcome to Omega-7, and I wish it were under better circumstances. So do I, Commander, Connor replied. Where do you need us? Velther brought up a holographic display of the station and highlighted several sections in red. These areas have been compromised, he explained. We've moved all personnel to the interior sections, but the Kresh are trying to board us. If they get into the station, we can't stop them in close combat. Connor studied the map carefully. What about these breached sections? He asked and pointed to the areas marked in red. Abandoned, Velther said. The environmental conditions are too hostile, and my people can't operate there without specialized equipment we don't have. Eric stepped forward and examined the map. Captain, we could set up defensive positions in those breached sections, he suggested. Use them as kill zones. Velther looked confused. Your people can operate in vacuum. Our armor is rated for it, Eric explained. Earth's environment prepared us for a lot of different conditions. Vacuum is just one more variable. Velther eyes widened as he began to understand. What was uninhabitable to his people was merely uncomfortable for humans. If you can hold those positions, it would buy us significant time. Velther said. Eric nodded to his Marines. Let's move out and remember your training and watch your oxygen levels and keep communication open. The Marines filed past Connor and headed toward the breached sections. Connor turned back to Velther. I need to speak with your chief medical officer, he said. My doctor is setting up to receive wounded, Velther led Connor through the station's corridors, and they passed groups of refugees huddled in emergency shelters. Connor saw species he'd never encountered before, and all of them looked terrified. Children clung to their parents, and elders tried to maintain calm despite the situation. They reached the medical bay where Dr. Lauren Chun was already coordinating with the station's medical. Lauren was a small woman with dark hair pulled back and Steady brown eyes that radiated competence, she looked up as Connor and Velther entered. "Captain," she acknowledged, "I'm setting up triage protocols, but I need information on alien physiology." The station's medical AI projected a holographic interface. "I am Med-7. The AI announced, "I can provide necessary biological data for all council species." Lauren immediately began working with the AI, and her fingers moved rapidly across the holographic controls. "This is going to be interesting," she muttered. "Half of these species have biochemistry completely different from humans." Connor watched as Lauren pulled up medical scans of various alien species. Some had copper-based blood, and others had distributed nervous systems, and a few didn't even breathe oxygen. "Can you handle this?" Connor asked. Lauren looked at him with a slight smile. "Captain, I've treated injuries in environments from Arctic tundra to desert heat waves, and alien biology is just another challenge. Besides, pain is universal, and that's a good place to start." An explosion rocked the station, and the lights flickered. "They're intensifying the assault," Velther said grimly. Connor activated his communication device. "Eric, status report." Eric's voice came through clearly, despite the sound of weapons fire in the background. "We're in position, Captain, and the crash are trying to board through the breached hull. They seem confused that we're here. Hold those positions." Connor ordered, "We need to buy time for evacuation." "Understood, sir." Connor turned to Velther. "How many civilians can we evacuate?" "The frontier can't hold 40,000 people," Velther said. "And even if it could, the docking procedure under fire is too risky." "What about the civilian transports?" Connor asked and pointed to a section of the map showing docked vessels. Velther shook his head. "They're unarmed and unshielded, and they wouldn't survive 5 minutes in the battle zone." Connor studied the map, and his tactical mind analyzed the possibilities. What if we used the frontier as a shield? He proposed, "Position the civilian transports behind us, and we cover their escape while they make the jump to hyperspace." Velther considered this carefully. "It would expose your ship to concentrated fire," he said. "You'd be destroyed." "Maybe," Connor agreed, "but the civilians would escape, and that's what matters." Velther stared at the human captain and tried to comprehend this willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers. In his long career with the Galactic Council, he had seen species fight for territory and resources and political power, but he had never seen someone volunteer to die for people they'd never met. "Why?" Velther asked quietly. "Why are you willing to die for us?" Connor met the Centauri commander's gaze steadily. "Because you asked for help," he said simply. "On Earth, we have a saying, 'No one left behind,' and it doesn't matter if we've known you for years or just met you. If you need help and we can give it, we do. That's what makes us human." Before Velther could respond, Katie's voice came through Connor's communication device. "Captain, sensors are detecting a massive hyperspace signature, and it's big." Connor felt his stomach drop. "What kind of signature?" "Unknown configuration," Katie reported. "It's 10 times larger than anything we've encountered." Velther pulled up his own communication device and accessed the station's sensors. His face went pale, and all 4 of his arms trembled. "No," he whispered. "What is it?" Connor demanded. "A crash planet killer," Velther said. "I've seen intelligence reports, but never thought I'd encounter one. It's a living vessel capable of destroying entire worlds." Connor looked at the tactical display and watched as a massive organic ship emerged from hyperspace. It dwarfed everything else in the system, and its hull pulsed with that characteristic green bioluminescence. Weapons ports that looked like gaping mouths opened along its surface. "Time to weapons range?" Connor asked. 2 hours, Velther said. "Maybe less." Connor activated the ship-wide communication to the frontier. "All hands, we have a new situation, and a crash planet killer has entered the system. Continue current operations and prepare for heavy combat. He turned to Velthor. Start loading civilians onto those transports. Connor ordered. We don't have much time. Captain, even if we evacuate everyone, the planet killer will destroy any ships that try to escape. Velthor protested. Then we'll deal with that when the time comes, Connor said firmly. Right now, let's focus on getting people off this station. Velthor wanted to argue, but something in Connor's expression stopped him. The human captain had already proven that his people didn't give up easily, maybe. Just maybe, they had one more miracle in them. I'll begin the evacuation, Velthor said, as the Centauri commander hurried away. Connor contacted Eric again. Sergeant, we've got a planet killer incoming and I need you to prepare demolition charges in the outer sections. If the crash board in force, we might need to vent entire sections. Understood, Captain. Eric replied, We'll set up the charges now. Connor made his way back to the frontier, and his mind raced through tactical possibilities. A planet killer was beyond anything they had trained for and beyond anything Earth's small fleet could handle, but 40,000 civilians were counting on them, and Connor had made a promise. He reached the bridge and found Katie coordinating defensive patterns. Captain, the crash swarm is regrouping, she reported. They're forming up around the planet killer. Connor took his seat and stared at the massive vessel on the view screen. Katie, I need you to calculate firing solutions for the planet killer, he said. Find any weak points in its structure. Katie worked her console, but her expression grew troubled. Captain, our weapons won't even scratch that thing, and it's too big and too heavily armored. Calculate them anyway, Connor ordered. We don't give up until we're dead. Katie nodded and began running the calculations. Connor activated the long-range communication system and broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Connor Blake, Earth, he said, to any ships in range. We are defending Defense Station Omega-7 against crash forces. We have 40,000 civilians who need evacuation. If anyone can hear this, we need help. Connor stood in the conference room with his senior staff and Commander Velthor. Holographic display between them showed the approaching planet killer in horrifying detail. Katie had finished her analysis and the results were devastating. The planet killer's main weapon will destroy the station with a single shot, she reported. Our shields might give us 8 seconds of protection before complete failure. Eric leaned forward and studied the massive vessel. What about boarding it? He suggested. Get a team inside and sabotage the weapon systems. Impossible, Velthor said quietly. The interior is a living organism, and it would detect intruders immediately and consume them. The crash don't build ships, and they grow them. Connor paced the small room, and his mind worked through impossible scenarios. Every tactical option led to the same conclusion. They couldn't win, but he refused to accept that. Commander, what's the status of the civilian evacuation? He asked. Velthor pulled up data on his portable display. We have 38,000 civilians loaded onto transports, he said. 2,000 remain on the station, including essential personnel and the wounded who can't be moved. Connor nodded slowly. How long until the transports can jump to hyperspace? They need to be at least 10,000 kilometers from the station, Velthor explained. Otherwise, the gravitational interference will tear them apart during the jump. At current speed, 20 minutes. 20 minutes. The planet killer would be in weapons range in 15. We need to buy more time. Connor said. Velthor's expression showed deep sorrow, and all 4 of his arms hung limply. Captain, I need to tell you something, he said quietly. The Galactic Council has issued orders to evacuate command staff and abandon the station. The room fell silent. They wrote us off, Eric said. Bitter Velthor nodded. Reinforcements aren't coming, and the crash advance has been too rapid. The Council decided to consolidate forces at more defensible positions and leave 40,000 people to die. Katie demanded, The council makes difficult decisions, Valther said, but I've been ignoring those orders for the past 6 hours. I couldn't abandon these people. Connor looked at the Centauri commander with new respect. Valther had been fighting against orders from his superiors and risking his career, and possibly his life to protect civilians. What changed your mind? Connor asked. Ed Valther met Connor's gaze steadily. You did, he said simply. When you crossed the galaxy to help strangers, when you fought despite taking heavy casualties, when you asked how you could help instead of whether you should, you showed me what it means to serve something greater than yourself. Connor felt the weight of those words, but pushed them aside. There would be time for reflection later if they survived. Then let's make sure those civilians escape. He said, Katie, I need a plan to protect the transports during their run to hyperspace range. Katie worked her console and brought up tactical projections. We position the frontier between the planet killer and the transports, she said. Maximum shields on the side facing the enemy, and we absorb the first shot. That will destroy us, Eric pointed out. Yes, Katie agreed, but it gives the transports the time they need. Connor studied the projection and calculated the angles if they positioned correctly. The Frontier's sacrifice would shield the civilian ships, 40,000 lives for 200. The math was brutal, but clear. Do it, Connor ordered. Calculate the exact positioning and transmit coordinates to the helm. Valther stepped forward, and his large eyes showed emotions Connor couldn't quite read. Captain, my remaining ships will stand with you, he said. We asked for help, and you answered, and the least we can do is stand together. Commander, your orders, Connor began, can go to hell. Valther interrupted. I followed orders my entire career, but some things matter more than regulations. Those civilians matter more. Eric grinned and clapped one of Valther's forearms. Welcome to the Ignoring Stupid Orders Club, he said. We humans are founding members. Despite the desperate situation, Valther managed a slight smile. Connor activated his communication device and connected to the entire fleet. All ships. This is Captain Blake, he announced. We're going to position between the planet killer and the civilian transports. Our job is to buy 20 minutes for those transports to reach hyperspace range. I won't lie to you, and this will likely be a one-way mission. He paused and gathered his thoughts. But those 40,000 people deserve to live, and they deserve to know that someone stood up for them. They deserve to know that when they called for help, someone answered. If we fall today, we fall defending what we believe in. That's not a bad way to go. The communication channel was quiet for a moment before responses started coming in. Engineering standing by. Captain, the chief engineer reported. We'll give you every bit of power we have. Medical ready. Lauren's voice came through. We'll save everyone we can. Marines ready to fight. Eric added. Today's a good day to make Earth proud. Katie looked up from her station. Tactical ready. Captain, she said. Let's show these bugs what humans can do. Connor felt pride surge through him. His crew knew they were probably going to die, but not one of them hesitated. That was what Earth had made them. People who chose to protect others even at the cost of their own lives. All ships, move into position. Connor ordered. The Frontier began moving slowly, and its damaged engines straining with the Fort Valters. Remaining ships formed up alongside, and their shields locked together in a defensive formation on the station. Eric and his Marines set their final demolition charges. The outer sections were rigged to vent if the crush tried to board and force it. It was a last desperate measure, but every option mattered now. Lauren worked in the medical bay and treated the last wounded. Before the transports launched, she moved between human and alien patients with equal care and her hand steady despite knowing what was coming. One young Centauri soldier grabbed her arm as she passed. Why are you doing this? He asked. You could save yourself and run. Lauren looked down at the young alien and thought of her grandmother. The old woman had survived the California earthquakes by helping strangers escape burning buildings. She had taught Lauren that service to others was the highest calling. We're dangerous. Yes, Lauren said gently. Earth made us tough and hard to kill, but that's not all we are. We're also the species that runs into burning buildings to save people we've never met. Today, this station is our burning building. The young soldier's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. He whispered. Lauren squeezed his shoulder and moved on. There were still people who needed her help on the bridge. Connor watched the planet killer approach. The massive organic ship seemed to fill the view screen, and its weapons charging with green bioluminescent energy. Time to firing range? He asked. 3 minutes. Katie reported. Civilian transports? 17 minutes from hyperspace range. The math didn't work, but Connor had known that from the beginning. All power to forward shields. He ordered. Divert everything we can spare. The frontier shields blazed to life and formed a barrier between the civilians and death. Zoaris. Ships added their own shields, and the combined defense created a wall of energy. It wouldn't be enough, but it was all they had. Captain. Incoming transmission, Katie said. It's on all frequencies. Connor frowned. From who? I don't know, Katie replied, but it's a strong signal and really strong. Put it through. The view screen shifted, and Connor saw something he hadn't expected. A human face appeared, and an older woman with gray hair and admiral stars on her uniform. This is Admiral Susan Carter of the Earth Defense Fleet, she announced. We received your distress call. Captain Blake. Connor felt hope surge through him. Admiral, we're in a desperate situation. We know. Admiral Carter interrupted. We've been monitoring your position and help is on the way. ETA. To your location. 3 minutes. Connor's mind reeled, and reinforcements were coming. Human reinforcements. How many ships? He asked. 20. Admiral Carter replied. Everything we could scramble on short notice, and we're not going to let you face this alone. Captain, the cavalry is here. Connor felt his throat tighten with emotion, but pushed it aside. Admiral, there's a planet killer. Charging weapons, and it'll fire in less than 3 minutes. We see it. Admiral Carter said grimly. All ships, prepare for combat and remember your training, and make Earth proud. The transmission ended, and Connor turned to his crew. You heard the Admiral, he said. We've got backup coming, and we just need to hold a little longer. Katie's console beeped urgently. Captain, the planet killer is firing. Connor gripped his chair. All shields forward and brace for impact. The massive organic weapon discharged, and a beam of concentrated energy struck the combined shields. The frontier shook violently, and systems exploded. Across the bridge, Connor felt the deck lurch beneath him, and sparks showered from damaged consoles. Shield strength dropping. Katie shouted over the alarms. 60% and 40% and 20%. The shields held for 8 seconds. Exactly as Katie had predicted, then they failed. The beam struck the Frontier's hull and tore through armor plating. Connor felt the ship dying around him. But 8 seconds had been enough. 20 human warships dropped out of hyperspace and immediately opened fire on the planet killer. The Frontier's bridge was chaos, and sparks flew from damaged consoles, and smoke filled the air. Connor pulled himself up from where the impact had thrown him and tasted blood in his mouth. Damage report. He shouted. Katie struggled with her console, and her hands moved across controls that were half-destroyed hull breaches on decks 4, 7, and 9. She reported. Life support is failing, and we've lost main power. Connor looked at the view screen and saw the Earth Defense Fleet engaging the planet-killer. 20 human warships moved in coordinated attack patterns, and their railguns hammered the massive organic vessel. The crashed bioship was enormous, but Earth's fleet fought with the same aggressive tactics Connor had demonstrated. They didn't maintain safe distances, and they closed to point-blank range where their kinetic weapons would do maximum damage. Get me a channel to Admiral Carter. Connor ordered. Katie worked her console, but shook her head. Communications are down, she said. We're dead in space, Captain. Connor activated his emergency communicator and hoped the short-range transmitter still worked. This is Captain Blake to any Earth vessel. He broadcast. The frontier is crippled and we need immediate evacuation for survivors. Acosta. The frontier is crippled and we need immediate evacuation for survivors. Cost. The frontiersten reservidas. Hast. Response came through immediately. Frontier. This is the Eds Valiant. A voice replied. We're moving to your position and hang tight. Connor turned to his crew. Abandon ship. He ordered. All hands to escape pods and get to the station if you can. The bridge crew began evacuating, but Connor stayed at his post. He watched the view screen as the human fleet tore into the planet killer. Admiral Carter's flagship led the assault, and its massive railguns fired round after round into the bioship's hull. The crash vessel tried to regenerate, but the damage was coming too fast on the station. Eric watched through the breached hull as the battle raged outside. His Marines had held their positions against constant crash-boarding attempts. Now they watched as Earth's fleet turned the tide. That's what I'm talking about. One Marine shouted. Humanity. Showing up to kick ass. Eric grinned beneath his helmet but kept his focus on the tactical situation. The crash were pulling back from the station and diverting forces to defend their planet killer. All units, hold position, Eric ordered. Stay alert until we get confirmation the threat is over. In the medical bay, Lauren worked frantically to stabilize patients before the station lost power completely. The battle had caused new casualties, and both human and alien wounded filled every Beta Centauri. Engineer stumbled in with severe burns, and Lauren immediately began treatment. The alien's physiology was completely different from human, but pain and injury were universal. You're going to be okay, Lauren said soothingly as she worked. Stay with me. The engineer's large eyes focused on her. The humans came back, he whispered. More of you came. We don't leave people behind, Lauren replied. That's not who we are. Outside, the battle reached its peak. The planet killer's weapons fired at the human fleet, but Earth ships used tactics that seemed insane to the Crash Hive Mind. They scattered and regrouped and attacked from unexpected angles and used the wreckage of destroyed crash ships as cover. What looked like chaos was actually carefully coordinated human teamwork. Ship captain made independent decisions, but worked toward the same goal. It was the opposite of the Crash Hive mind, and it was devastatingly effective. Admiral Carter's voice came through on all human frequencies. All ships, concentrate fire on the planet killer's main weapon ports, she ordered. Let's take away its biggest advantage. 20 ships focused their railguns on specific targets, and solid metal slugs traveling at hypersonic speeds punched through organic armor. The planet killer's main weapon exploded in a cascade of green ichor, but the crash weren't finished. Thousands of smaller ships swarmed the human fleet, and their bioweapons fired streams of acid and flesh-eating organisms. 3 Earth ships took critical damage and began emergency evacuation procedures. Then, something unexpected happened. A dozen Galactic Council warships dropped out of hyperspace and joined the battle. They were the reinforcements Velther had been promised, but task force that had been diverted from another sector. The Council fleet commander broadcast a message. Human vessels. This is Commander Zareth of the Council Defense Force, a deep voice announced. We're here to assist, Admiral Carter responded immediately. Glad to have you, Commander. Let's finish this. The combined human council fleet hit the planet killer. From all sides, human tactics combined with council technology created a devastating assault. The crash bioship tried to retreat, but it was too damaged and too slow. Connor watched from the crippled frontier as the massive vessel began to break apart. Green bioluminescence flickered and died along its hull. The organic armor cracked and split. Finally, the planet killer exploded in a spectacular burst of green energy. The shockwave rocked every ship in the system, but the threat was over. Cheers erupted across the human fleet, and on the station Eric's Marines celebrated with the Centauri defenders. And Katie hugged the surviving bridge crew of the Frontier. Lauren allowed herself a moment of relief before returning to her patients. Connor sat in his damaged command chair and felt exhaustion wash over him. They had done it, and against impossible odds they had saved 40,000 people. Captain, the Valiant is alongside, Katie reported. They're ready to take us aboard. Connor nodded and stood slowly. His body ached from the battle, and his uniform was torn and blood-stained. But he was alive, and more importantly, the civilians were safe. As Connor walked through the Frontier's damaged corridors, he saw his crew helping each other evacuate. They had lost 72 people in the battle, and the names of the dead would haunt him forever, but they had saved so many more on the station. Commander Velther stood in what remained of his command center. The battle was over, but the station was barely functional. Power was failing and life support was critical, and structural integrity was compromised. But every single civilian had escaped to safety. Cass approached him with a smile on her young face. "Commander, the human admiral is requesting to speak with you," she said. Velther accepted the communication, and Admiral Carter's image appeared. "Commander Velther," she said formally, "on behalf of Earth and humanity, I apologize for our delay in responding. Captain Blake beat us here." Velther felt confused. "Apologize?" He repeated, "You saved us and your fleet turned the tide, because one of our captains had the courage to answer your distress call without waiting for orders." Admiral Carter said, "Connor Blake reminded us all what it means to serve. He reminded us why we put on these uniforms." Velther looked around his damaged station and thought about the past hours. A single human ship had responded to a desperate plea and fought against impossible odds. That captain had inspired his own crew and convinced Velther himself to defy orders. And now an entire human fleet had come to finish what Captain Blake started. "Admiral, I need to know something," Velther said. "Why do humans do this? Why sacrifice so much for strangers?" Admiral Carter was quiet for a moment before answering, "Because Earth made us this way." "Commander," she said, "our world tried to kill us every day for millions of years with predators and diseases and natural disasters. We survived by learning that we're stronger together, and that protecting each other was the only way to live. When you sent that distress call, you became part of our group, and humans protect their own." Velther felt something shift in his understanding of the galaxy. The Galactic Council had always measured species by their technology and economic power and military strength. But humans had shown something different. They had shown moral courage and the willingness to sacrifice for others that was worth more than any weapon. 6 months passed after the Battle of Omega 7th. Galactic Council held an emergency session to discuss humanity's role in the galaxy. Connor stood before the assembled representatives with Admiral Carter beside him. He wore his dress uniform, and the medals on his chest included one for valor that Velther himself had recommended. The council chambers were vast, and representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats. At the center sat the council chairman and an ancient being whose species had founded the galactic civilization, Captain Connor Blake. The chairman said, and his voice resonated through the chamber, "The council has reviewed your actions at Omega 7 and the rescue of 40,000 civilians from certain death." Connor stood at attention and said nothing. "Your tactics were reckless." The chairman continued, "Your disregard for proper authorization procedures was concerning, and your willingness to sacrifice your ship violated several council regulations." Connor braced himself for punishment. "However," the chairman said, and his Tone shifted. You also demonstrated qualities that the Council has not seen in many years. Courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to protecting innocent life. The chairman stood from his seat. Earth is formally invited to join the Galactic Council not as junior members, but as full partners with all rights and responsibilities. Furthermore, the Council is establishing a new defense force dedicated to answering distress calls that others consider hopeless. We will call it the Frontier Initiative in honor of the ship and captain that showed us what it means to serve. The chamber erupted. In applause, Connor felt tears sting his eyes, but maintained his composure admirably. Carter leaned close and whispered, "You did good. Connor and Earth is proud of you." After the ceremony, Connor found Velther waiting outside the council chambers.